गुड मॉर्निंग, वेलकम टू वी लर्न में आपका स्वागत है। टॉपिक्स to be covered are introduction, leveraged buyouts, its mode of purchase, governance aspect of leveraged buyouts, leveraged buyouts and corporate governance, stages of leveraged buyout operations, management buyouts, what are the motives behind management buyouts, what is the structure of a management buyout, the ratchets. Master limited partnership, various characteristics of master limited partnership, type of master limited partnership, employee stock ownership plans, what are the rules of employee stock ownership plan, type of employee stock ownership plans. An introduction. In the topics of LBO, MBOs, MLPs and ESOPs, we would be discussing what are the major types of corporate restructuring. So LBOs, MBOs, ESOPs, they are restructuring, corporate restructuring plan. Secondly, we would be discussing the LBO occurs when a financial sponsor gains control of a majority of target companies. Further, in MBO, management of company buys the company and then may be joined by employees in the venture. When we talk about leveraged buyouts, as far as an increased globalized economies are concerned, तो हम देख रहे हैं in this economic scenario where there are a lot of mergers and acquisitions, they have gained a significant importance both in the country as well as across the borders. So such acquisitions, they need huge amount of finance to be provided. So in search of an ideal mechanism to finance an acquisition, the concept of leveraged buyouts, that is LBO, it has emerged. LBO is a financing technique of purchasing a private company with the help of borrowed debt capital. So in nutshell, when a private company is being purchased, is being taken over with the help of borrowed capital, that amount of money which is borrowed from the capital market. So it is a financing technique of purchasing. Further, the leveraged buyouts, they are basically cash transactions in nature, where cash is borrowed by acquiring a firm, and debt financing, it represents 50 or more of the purchase price. Generally, when we talk about the tangible assets of the target company, they are used as collateral security for the loan borrowed by the firm in order to finance the acquisition. Now, there are some, at times what happens, a proportionate amount of the long-term financing is secured with the fixed asset of the firm, and in order to raise the balance amount of the total purchase price, unrated or low-rated debt, which is known as junk bond financing, is also utilized. Now there are various modes of purchases. So there are a number of types of financing which can be used and which leveraged a LBO. These includes, for example, first one is the senior debt. It is a kind of debt which is above and ahead of all other kind of debts or equity capital in the business. Business loans, they are basically They are basically or typically structured in up to 3 trenches like A, B and C. Here what happens, the debt is usually secured on specific assets of the company, which means the lender can automatically acquire these assets if the company breaches its obligation under the relevant loan agreement. Therefore, it becomes the lowest cost debt. When we talk about subordinated debt, this is the kind of debt which is behind the senior debt in order of priority, and it is a form of liquidation. So senior debt is most liquidated and subordinate is second best liquidated debt. So the terms here of the subordinated debt, they are usually less stringent than a senior debt. They are usually less stringent than the senior debt. Here the repayment is usually required in one bullet payment at the end of the term. Since subordinated debt gives the lender less security than senior debt, lending costs are typically higher. So an increasingly important form of subordinated debt is the high yield bond, which are often listed on Indian market. These high yield bonds can either be senior or subordinated securities that are publicly placed with institutional investors. When we talk about mezzanine finance, this is usually a high-risk subordinated debt and is regarded as a type of intermediate financing between debt and equity. So when financing is taken care of by taking care both debt and equity into consideration, then it becomes mezzanine financing, and it is an alternative to high yield bonds. An enhanced return is made available to lenders by the grant of an equity kicker, which crystallizes upon an exit. A form of this is basically called PIK, which is paid in kind or rolled up into the principal and generally includes an attached equity warrant. When we talk about loan stock, it can be a form of equity financing if it is convertible into equity capital. But the question of whether loan stock is tax deductible should be investigated thoroughly with the company's advisor. Another mode of purchase when we talk about is preference share. So this forms the part of a company's share capital, preference share capital, and it usually gives preference to company's equity preference shareholder, a fixed dividend and fixed share of the company's equity. So the current equity holders, they are given preference to they are entitled to a fixed dividend. When we talk about ordinary share, this is the riskiest part of any leveraged buyouts capital structure. Here the ordinary shareholder, they enjoy majority of the upside if the company is successful. There are governance aspect of leveraged buyouts also. So every restructuring program, they must generate some additional values for the businesses, owners or shareholders. So an LPO exercise also creates certain additional values for various groups which are involved in such an operation. The sources of value generated are as follows. The first one is reduction in the agency cost, which is the most important source of values in an LBO. When we talk about LBO refers to take a public corporation to private. In case of a public corporation, the management is different from the owners. So in practice, however, the management sometimes takes some suboptimal decision without the prior approval of its owner, which are proved to be costly and detrimental to the growth of the firm. The second source of value gain is associated with efficiency. So there are a lot of arguments that a private firm is much more efficient in taking decisions relating to a change environment than that of a public corporations, where every decision is not required to be ratified by the general body before implementation. The another source of value is gained in case of an LBO is a tax benefit as operations. The interest obligation of the private firm here is expected to have certain tax benefits. The concept of stepping up of assets for depreciation as an ingredient of LBO calls for additional tax advantage. The last one is that the management or the investors in an LBO deal, they have more information on the value of the firm than the ordinary shareholder. Because of this information, a buyout proposal gives indication to the market that the post-buyout scenario would certainly provide more operating incomes than previously expected, or that the firm is less risky than perceived by the public at present. When we talk about leveraged buyout and corporate governance, so LBO firms today, they are seeking to build value in acquired companies by improving their profitability, by pursuing growth which includes roll-up strategy. Roll-up strategy are such in which an acquired company serves as a platform for additional acquisitions of related businesses to achieve critical mass or generate economies of scale, and improving corporate governance to better align management incentives with those of the shareholders. Now, as a general rule, funds raised by private equity firms, they have a number of fairly standard provision. The first one is minimum commitment. When we talk about minimum commitment, there are prospective limited partners which are required to commit a minimum amount of equity in the firm. So these limited partners, they make a capital commitment which is then drawn down, or a take down or capital call by the general partner in order to make investments with the fund's equity. The second is investment or commitment period. Here, during the term of the commitment period, limited partners, they are obligated to meet capital calls upon by the general partner by transferring capital to the fund within an agreed upon period of time, which is often not more than 10 days. The term of the commitment period here usually lasts for almost either 5 or 6 years after closing of the fund, or until 75 to 100% of the fund's capital which has been invested, whichever comes first. Another is the term. So the term of the partnership which is formed during the fundraising process is usually 10 to 11 years. The half of which, 10 to 12 years, or the fund amount that is raised, represents the committed period. The second half of the period, of which the reserved for managing and exiting investments which are made during the commitment period. The last one is diversification. So here most funds partnership agreements stipulate that the partnership may not invest more than 25% of the fund's equity in any single investment. Now, stages of leveraged buyout operations. So, four distinct but related stages are envisaged for the proper implementation of an MBO programs. The first stage when we talk about is the stage of arrangement of finance. It is a stage where operations basically consist of raising the cash required for the buyouts and working out a management incentive system. The equity base of the new firm consists of around 10% of the cash put up by the company's top management or buyout specialist. The second stage consists of going private. In this particular stage, the organizing or sponsoring group purchases all the outstanding shares of the target company and takes it private through stock purchases format or purchase all assets through asset purchasing format. In the later case, when we discuss, the purchasing group here forms another new, which is privately held corporation. It is done to reduce the debt by paying a part of bank loan. The new owners there sometimes sell off part of the corporation and may also begin disposing of the inventory. The third stage comes, it is a stage of restructuring. When we talk about restructuring, the new management here would try to enhance the generation of profit and cash flows. How do they do profit and cash flows? They do it by reducing certain operating cost and charging the marketing strategy. For this operation, a firm is required to adopt the following or either of the points that we are discussing. The first point is consolidation and reorganization of existing production facilities. Another option, another strategy that a firm may follow is changing the product mix. How can they change the product mix? By changing the quality of the product and changing the policies relating to customer service and pricing. Also, a firm may try to trim employment through attrition. Further, there could be a scenario where phasing out employees in turns and reduction on spending on research and development, new plants, etc. So long as there is a need for the fresh required debt. Also, a firm may indulge themselves into extraction and implementation of better terms for various suppliers. There is the last stage. This is the stage of reverse leveraged buyouts. So here the investor group, they take the company to public again. If already restructured company emerges stronger and the goals set by the LBO groups have already been achieved. This is also known as the process of reverse LBO or the process of going public, where it is effected through public equity offering. This type of reversed LBO is executed mostly by ex-post successful LBO companies. When we talk about management buyouts or MBO takes place when a group of managers buy the business they work in from its existing owners. This will usually require support from outside the business, such as bankers or venture capitalists. Buyouts can vary enormously in their size, and some can be straightforward transactions while others can be more complex. The key feature of all MBOs is that the member of the team, they put in some personal money in return for an equity interest or a stake in the business. They become the stakeholders. When the team puts in varies from deal to deal. Here bankers are expect that it is meaningful, which means that it represents a considerable commitment by the management team. Motives behind management buyouts. There are reasons that many managers take plunge and mount an MBO is because the existing owners see the particular part of the business as they work in as no longer core to the whole company. They could be planning to sell it or even close the operations. Some companies, what they do when they are in some kind of financial difficulties, they decide that and they come to the conclusion that they want to sell off the assets so that more cash is brought to the company and it saves it from the financial ruining. So they may be much more open to an MBO offers than they would otherwise normally be. Now there are certain common reasons for companies or even individuals to consider opting or adopting an MBO strategy, which includes first is non-core divestment and efficiency improvements. Here an organization which is focusing on efficiency improvement or even consolidating its core activities, they will quite often look to divesting business units that are a financial burden or represent a divergence from the new strategy. In this particular case, MBO can provide a smooth and efficient transaction that avoids inconvenience. Another is management incentivization. Management faces constant pressure many a times to maximize profit and even to implement new growth strategy. But it is quite often recognized that linking managerial compensation to substantial direct equity ownership can also provide a powerful incentive. Alright. Another is insolvency. Just in case in the event that the company has become insolvent and the receiver or the administrator has been appointed for an insolvent company, the current management, they may represent a viable acquirer for specific business units. When we talk about succession, an MBA can also provide a feasible solution to business succession issues, which could be like retirement of a key founder or partner. Regulatory requirement. In these kind of situation, the Consumer Commission, they may force a company to divest some part of their assets or even business unit or the portion of total acquisitions which are done recently in the interest of maintaining competition. In such a situation, an MBO offers a cost-effective means of compliance. When we talk about bundled businesses, there could be circumstances where a company acquires more than one businesses, that is bundle of businesses, but they may not have intentions of operating all aspects of each business. They may opt out few of the businesses. So an MBO strategy can be adopted for divestment of the undesirable components. The last one is aspiration divergence. So at any given point, if a company in a company's life cycle, current managers and owners, if they hold different opinions as to the future direction the business should go, here a properly planned and executed MBO can therefore offer a viable resolution to major business disagreements. When we talk about structure of a management buyout, so depending upon the size and complexity of the transaction, a properly structured and implemented MBO strategy can ordinarily take between 2 to 8 months. So a successful MBO process must include the following plan. The first is business plan development. It is very vital and a very important component that the MBO team, they have a clear understanding of what it aims to achieve and how it has its intentions to achieving it. So the development of a comprehensive business plan, it must include the company's financial projections, the strategy the team will implement to achieve these projections, the level of capital investment which are required, and the clear definition of the success. Another is selection of financial supporters. Here the individual managers involved in a buyout will often lack the financial capacity to fund the transaction on their own. So frequently what happens? The buyout team, they will seek backing from an equity partner, which could be an equity private equity firm, PE firms when we talk about. So a careful planning and selection of an appropriate equity partner is very, very crucial to the success of an MBO team. Another step which is to be taken care of is conducting due diligence. So an MBO team, they will have a greater knowledge of the business than the external acquirer, but it is still very important that a proper due diligence is undertaken. So the individual managers who are involved in the MBO, they will have an access to certain types of confidential information, but it is important that any buyout team, they too have access to all kinds of relevant information and that they can assess the full situation objectively. Another is debt funding. So it is a scenario where the firm tries to identify the types of debt funding, and securing the debt becomes an important and the next step in the buyout process. So the common form of debt funding for a MBO, as we had discussed, is senior debt. However, a combination of mezzanine funding and possibly hybrid capital can also be arranged along with senior debt. The last step is the documentation. It is to create and sign off the legal documentation between the parties concerned. Here it outlines the relationship between all shareholders of the restructured entity. The ratchets, when we say, they are common arrangements in MBO transactions which are designed to incentivize the management team to achieve the targets. Here the equity investors, they use ratchets to reduce downside investment risk and share upside potential. If agreed targets are met, the management team, they also receive a larger stake in the business. When we talk about reverse ratchets, they are structured inversely to normal ratchets, in that if targets are not met by the firm, the management's stake in the business is taken back. Putting this all together, an illustrative deal structure between the investors and the management team is incorporating ratchets could be: first, the management buyout. Here the management team owns 25% of the common shares of the business. The second is the performance ratchet. It states that if the capitalized value of the business upon sale or flotation is 40 or better, then the management team shall receive 30% of the common shares of the business. The last one is reverse ratchets. If the capitalized value of the business upon sale or flotation is 20 or less, then the management team shall receive 20% of the common share of the business. The targets underpinning ratchets, they are usually based on profits or capitalized value upon sale or flotation. Where ratchets are to be used, it is very important to precisely and very clearly define the terms of agreement and trigger the mechanisms to reduce any legal issues. Master Limited Partnership. It is a limited partnership which is publicly traded on a security exchange. It also combines the tax benefit of a limited partnership with the liquidity of publicly traded security. Here the limited partnership interest is divided into units which are traded as share of common stock. There are certain characteristics of master limited partnership. The first one is tax treatment. Since all MLPs, master limited partnership, they are structured as partnerships, they do not pay corporate income tax. So taxes here are only paid when distributions are received. Another is consistent distributions. All MLPs, they face very strict provisions, including the requirement to pay minimum quarterly distribution to their limited partners by contract. Energy infrastructure. The majority of MLPs in the energy sector, which are particularly in the energy infrastructure industries, the performance of companies in the energy infrastructure industry, they are not highly correlated with the price of oil and other type of energies, but rather than the demand for the energy. Unlimited life. The life of the MLP is of unlimited nature. So they are typically specify a limited life of 100 years more or less. Types of master limited partnership. The first one is roll-up MLPs. So roll-up MLPs, they are formed by a combination of two or more partnership into one publicly traded partnership. Liquidation MLPs, they are formed by offering MLP interest to public with the proceeds used to purchase assets. Another is acquisition MLPs. They are formed by an offering MLP interest to the publics with the proceeds used to purchase assets. Roll out MLPs, These types of MLPs are formed by a corporation, contribution of operating assets in exchange of general and limited partnership. Startup MLPs, they are formed by partnership that is initially privately held but later offers its interest to the public in order to finance internal growth. When we talk about employee stock ownership plan, they are corporation owned in whole or in part by their employees. Here employees are usually given a share of corporation after a certain length of employment they fulfill, and then they can buy shares at any times. A corporation owned entirely by its employees will not therefore have its shares sold in public stock markets. Also, employee-owned corporation, they often adopt profit sharing where the profits of the corporation are shared by the employees. So these types of corporations, they often have boards of directors which are usually elected directly by the employees. When we take the example of USA, employee-owned corporations, they are often created by employee stock ownership plans, that is ESOPs. Alright, and a notable example of this type of employee-owned corporation is the UK firm John Lewis. There are certain rules of employee stock ownership plans. So an ESOP is a kind of employee benefit plan which is similar to a profit sharing plan. In an ESOP, a company sets up a trust fund into which it contributes new share of its own stock or cash to buy existing share. Alternatively, what happens? The ESOP can also borrow money to buy new or existing share, with the company making cash contribution to the plan to enable it to repay the loan. There are certain key rules of ESOP which are to be followed. One is vesting. Vesting is the time an employer must work before acquiring entitlement to the benefit. Another is distribution after termination. So with retirement, disability or death, the distribution of vested benefit occurs. Alright. Another is distribution during employment. So employee may diversify their account and receive cash or stock directly. Here what happens, employers, they may choose to pay dividends to a participant who is at least a 5% owner after the age of 70. Put option is another thing. So what happens in this case, some companies, they provide a put option for company stock options via ESOP benefit plan. So this option allows employees to sell their company stock back to the employer within 60 days following distribution and within 60 days during the following plan year. Last one is the taxations. Here employees pay no tax on stock until they receive the distribution. Types of employee stock option plans, there are two types, leveraged and non-leveraged. So when we talk about leveraged ESOP, it borrows money on the credit of the employer or other related parties to buy company stock. It is the only qualified employee benefit plan that can do this. Another is non-leveraged ESOP. It is a stock bonus plan which is identified as an ESOP in the plan document, that invest primarily in the company's stock and meet certain legal requirements. Here the sponsoring employer contributes newly issued or treasury stock and or cash to buy stock from existing owners. Two exercises that needs to be done. First, explain the structure of management buyout. Second, enumerate various stages of leveraged buyout operations. Thank you and have a nice day. Keep learning and relearning.